Friends, forgive me if you've heard this joke before, but you'll understand why this is the day and the Sabbath to share it. A young Jewish couple got married and went on their honeymoon. And when they got back, the bride immediately called her mother. Well, her mother said, "So how was the honeymoon?" "Oh, Mama," she replied, "the honeymoon was wonderful, so romantic." Suddenly, though, the daughter burst out crying. "But Mom, as soon as we returned, Sam started using the most horrible language, things I'd never heard before. I mean, all these awful 4-letter words. You've got to take me home. Please, Mama. Please come get me." "Sarah, Sarah," her mom said, "calm down. You need to stay with your husband and work this out. Now tell me, what could be so awful? What 4-letter words?" "Please don't make me tell you, Mama," wept the daughter. "I'm so embarrassed. They're just too awful. Come get me, please." "Darling baby, you must tell me what has you so upset. You can tell your mom anything. Tell her these horrible 4-letter words." And sobbing, the bride said, "Oh, Mama, he used words like dust, wash, iron, and cook." The mom said, "I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. Today, March 1st, in case you didn't know, today is the first day of Women's History Month, whose purpose is to increase our consciousness and knowledge about women's history, to take 1 month of the year to remember the contributions of notable and ordinary women in hopes that there will come a day when it will be impossible to learn or teach history without remembering the sacrifices and contribution of great women against all odds. At Temple for Notable Women, look no further than row 4, seat 3, the upcoming cover of our Temple Voice Bulletin, featuring our first female president, Mildred Schwartz, who celebrated her 100th birthday last December. When Mildred was born in 1918, women were not even allowed to vote in America. Think about that. Tomorrow morning is a bar mitzvah, Aiden, but in a few weeks, we will have another new Jewish development within Mildred's lifetime, bat mitzvah. A 4,000-year-old people took thousands of years to allow girls the same privilege boys have enjoyed since the Middle Ages. The first time a girl read from the Torah as a bat mitzvah was not until 1924, 4 years after women could vote. Generations of American Jews today assume that women can be rabbis and cantors, but it was not until the Hebrew Union College ordained my colleague and friend Sally Prezand, the rabbi, in 1972, not until her would you ever see or hear women like Cantor Abby, Rabbi Bess, or Rabbi Katie. Yet another unknown fact is that the ceremony when a Jewish teen officially becomes a young adult, confirmation, is the first ceremony in all of Jewish history when girls participated equally with boys on the same pulpit. As we begin Women's History Month, most of us are living empowered, independent, autonomous lives as men or women, but let us not presume for a minute that victory has been won. My, how far we still have to go. As I learned this week while pumping gas and hearing this comment about the arrest of Patriots owner Robert Kraft, who allegedly paid for sexual services at a day spa in Jupiter, Florida. I heard this guy say, "I really feel for the old guy. He was just lonesome. Why are they picking on him?" Now, I was late for an appointment here, so I drove back to Temple. Instead of interrupting that this wealthy businessman caught in the Florida sting is just one of hundreds paying women who are literally in sexual servitude. Girls promised that they were coming to America for a better life, yet forced to live in a spa all day into the evening, coerced to perform sex acts on strangers, earn no wages, have no autonomy. If the result of this week's story is to galvanize more men and women to stop sex trafficking from Memphis to Milwaukee and Florida to Phoenix, then maybe we'll start making some good history for women this month. We live in a country where women have achieved unprecedented rights as a group, a nation where many really could laugh at my joke, thank God, about the four-letter words like iron, dust, wash, and cook. But some in the religious world still use our Bible to demean, degrade, and devalue women. They're elected officials who believe that God is on their side, who have claimed that moms who work outside the home, this is a direct quote, stunt the emotional growth of their children. Forget about how wrong it is to deny women the same choices that men have, to deny moms the same choices that fathers do. The facts are, and listen closely, 30% of families with children today, 30% are led by a single parent. And 85% of those families are led by a woman, usually Black, Hispanic, or another racial minority without money for child support. And you know who taught me that? A Jewish single mom in our congregation who brought this to my attention. She is a professional success. She isn't poor herself, but she reminded me what we too often forget. Poverty hits women hardest. And given that fact, not your opinion, comfort, or economic wherewithal, given those facts, how can a religious person not be focused on this issue on this Shabbat? We also need this Women's History Month in the face of a single-minded concern as well with the unborn, which could refer to anything from an embryo to a fetus, certainly a potential human being. But equating personhood to an embryo buys into the dangerous portrayal of women who must terminate their pregnancies as murderers, with no concern whatsoever over the devastating toll done to women forced to give birth against their will throughout history and in Memphis today. The notion that rights of grown women to make choices about their body literally means less than fetuses is at odds with every legal teaching of Judaism. No matter what you read on the internet, Jewish law does not support government getting between a woman and the most painful and personal decisions she must make, including and especially when the culprit is another man, not a woman. And I, as a rabbi, have counseled women in our congregation on that issue. When girls and women are empowered to become whoever and whatever they wish to be, we move closer to the kind of world that's in your laps, the prayer book that Shabbat calls for, the kind of world that the Sabbath asks. Speaking of the world, I think almost everyone here knows about the genocide in Rwanda 25 years ago when nearly 1 million Tutsi citizens were slaughtered by the dominant Hutu group. But less known is what happened after 1994. You know what happened? The Rwandan people realized that the citizens who were killing and raping and lopping off other people's heads with machetes were virtually all men. So in reconstructing their nation, get this, the people of Rwanda stipulated that women must constitute half the candidates on the ballot for government positions in justice and education. And guess what the result was? Rwanda became the democracy in the world that was number one in female representation, 56.3%, even more than Sweden, The fear and genocide associated with Rwanda receded, and the lives of all Rwandan citizens have improved as a result. We need today's March 1st Women's History Month because empowering girls and women is still the global civil rights issue of our lifetime, an issue that transcends gender, whether you're a man or a woman, for the betterment of humanity and the world. And as Rabbi Rona Shapiro points out, we're in the closing chapters of Exodus. What does this have to do with the history of women, today's Torah portion? Everything. As we end the book of Exodus with Vayakel and Pikudei, we're descending from the heights of Mount Sinai to the areas where women have excelled, even when they were marginalized. We read this week about interior design and fashion and the radical idea that we humans can build a house for God, as the 5 designing women helped me and a committee of 200, and I'm looking at one of them, Nancy, back in 2000, in the renewal of this house of God. Even if in biblical times, the sanctuary was not like this, it was more like a fancy tent. The radical idea was that God, in all of God's mystery, God who's beyond time and space, would dwell among us right here. And from this perspective, Rabbi Shapiro notes, the many mundane articles, details about clothing, architecture, found in this week's portion become more understandable. Have any of you ever built a house? If so, you probably begin with a vision of a certain kind of place, right? How many bedrooms, a feeling, a hope, maybe even a floor plan. But the actual building of the house ends up being an entirely different process. You got to pick faucets, doorknobs, molding strips, window frames. They overtake the initial vision. It's easy to lose sight of the whole house for which you were striving. But as Rabbi Shapiro notes, and I quote, there simply is no way to build a house without those details. And throughout history, sadly, the vast majority of women were pushed to the margin outside the public sphere. It wasn't the man who raised the children, it was the women who kept everything together, raised the kids, cooked the meals, managed a farm, even enabled the lives of men who occupied the public sphere from which women were themselves excluded. So how do we celebrate their history, the history of all the great women, Jewish and other, if we don't know their names or their stories? And this is how I close. Rabbi Shapiro suggests the answer is in the Torah this week. God is not only on the mountaintop. God dwells in our houses that we build, including this house. God dwells in the challah we bake, in the curtains we hang. God even dwells in the good things people do at home, in the way they interact, in the words they speak, in our attention to the details. If we work at it, these closing verses of Torah say, God doesn't reside on a distant Mount Sinai, but in our homes, in our reach, and in our midst. God dwells not only in the clouds, but in our closets and cupboards too. God dwells wherever and whenever we let God in. And let us say, Amen.